Hey guys, welcome back to the I Can See Clearly Now series where I share 2020 visions that make life a little bit more fun. It's been interesting the past month or two here, and yeah, just checking in with life, with relationships, with just how things are going. And today, the topic of this I Can See Clearly Now episode does dive into relationships and just bringing some awareness to how our relationships have kind of shifted and changed over the last couple months, being in lovely lockdown. And we're getting a lot less of some loved ones and friends and a whole hell of a lot more of some others, like whoever you live with. So yeah, this episode was inspired by a couple friends and acquaintances who have shared with me just the trouble they've been having being at home, particularly with their significant other. And unfortunately, a couple of them have actually separated, broken up or even divorced in the last couple months. And that really kind of I don't know, just tore me up inside. Like, I had a couple of sleepless nights after learning about what some of my friends were going through. And yeah, I was just I just couldn't help but think how, what can I do to bring some attention to this area? And what can I do to maybe make things just a little bit easier at home for those of you who are at home with a partner, getting a lot more time with that person you so madly love and sometimes so madly hate. Not really, but hate's a strong word, but you know what I'm talking about. So yeah, this episode is all around just kind of, actually it's one of my favorite distinctions that's absolutely shifted everything in my life, not just relationships, but just life as a whole, and not just romantic relationships either, but those with my friends, my family, coworkers, etc. I don't have coworkers anymore, actually, so that's kind of great. But you know what I'm talking about. So yeah, I'll get right into it. Today we are going to be going over a little distinction that I call fronts. You frontin', playa? A front is kind of what it sounds like. There's a front and there's some shenanigans going on behind the scenes. So the way I define a front is a consistent complaint that comes from your relationship sabotaging evil twin. It's not the real you. It's that kind of little voice inside your head that likes to pick fights and be right and make your partner wrong and all those fun little things that happen. So yeah, I'm just going to share with you, I guess it's kind of like a little bit of an exercise, but just kind of run through this and you can start to look into your own life and see where you're fronting. Also, this exercise is kind of a little sneak peek into a workshop that I'm putting together called The Connection Cure. And The Connection Cure is geared toward people who are in romantic relationships at home right now and feeling a little disconnected despite all the time they are spending with their significant other. And yeah, things can just, things can get a little weird sometimes. So I'm just here to normalize it and bring it back to where you want it to be, which is full of love and connection and happiness and peace. So yeah, here goes. I'll just get right into it. So like I said, a front is a consistent complaint. And that's kind of the way to start seeing these things, is start to notice, what do I consistently complain about? And maybe it's, something that your partner does, or maybe it's something you're doing. Maybe it's something about the relationship, but there's some sort of consistent complaint. And you might be giggling over there right now because you probably aren't having a hard time figuring out what that consistent complaint is. Maybe your person isn't shutting the cupboards or leaving the cap off the toothpaste or leaving the door open or saying things that you aren't so fond of, or I don't know what it is, but you know what it is. So yeah, the way to kind of get into this is to yeah, just think about like, what do you consistently complain about in your relationship? And it's kind of the sad but true story, but it's just the nature of human beings. We do complain. It's kind of just a human thing. So don't feel bad about any of this as we walk through this. We all got something. So yeah, just think about what that consistent complaint might be. And then here's where it starts to get interesting is that behind that consistent complaint, there are a few things hiding. So, what's hiding is what's actually creating that disconnection in your relationship. And when you start to kind of shine light on what's hiding behind this front, that consistent complaint, you can start to kind of turn your attention to what's hiding behind it and become aware of it and then choose to sort of disappear it. So you'll get the hang of it as we go through this. So what's hiding behind a front is a payoff, a cost, and then your ego. So when I talked about your evil twin, your evil twin is kind of behind the front, just organizing and orchestrating everything and kind of hijacking your brain. So when you're making that consistent complaint, you can think about it as it's sort of your evil twin that's actually sabotaging their relationship, and it's not really you. So you can start to kind of observe it and disconnect from it. And then the last thing that's hiding behind the front that's actually tied to the payoff is an avoidance of responsibility. Exciting. So we'll get into it. But yeah, so cost, payoffs, your evil twin, and an avoidance of responsibility. So what some of these payoffs may include are being right or making the other person wrong. You wouldn't know anything about that, though, wanting to be right. No, not at all. Me neither. Looking good or looking bad, winning or losing, being good or being bad, dominating someone or something, or avoiding domination. And like I said, in all of these payoffs, there's also just at the root of all these payoffs, there's an avoidance of responsibility, which also that avoidance of responsibility is part of what's causing the disconnection in your relationship that's tied to this consistent complaint. So then costs include, but are not limited to, love, connection, happiness, peace of mind, satisfaction, fulfillment, joy, confidence, and health, whether it could be mental or physical health. But the list goes on with the costs. And these costs and payoffs can sometimes be a little tricky to spot, but once you do, it's just, yeah, it's a whole new world. It's a whole perspective shift. And it basically helps to kind of disappear that consistent complaint. So yeah, to kind of bring this to life, I'll share a little story from one of my coaching clients, and you can start to see how this all kind of plays out. So, so when I started working with this woman, one of her consistent complaints about her partner was that anytime there was any sort of conflict or argument brewing, he would just totally shut down and not want to talk about it and just, couldn't really handle. And she always wanted to talk it out and talk through it and, figure out what was going on and move past it. But what she didn't realize is that behind this front or consistent complaint, like, oh, you never want to talk things out, there were some costs and payoffs, some avoidance of responsibility, and her evil twin is at the root of all of it. So basically, not being present to the costs and the payoffs and the avoidance of responsibility and her evil twin at work, that is essentially what keeps this front in action, live, and, fed by these payoffs. Really, it's fed by the payoffs, and you'll see why here in a second as this continues to unravel. So they'd something would go on and he'd shut down and she'd basically turn into a wild woman and just make him so wrong and, just go off about it. It turned whatever the initial conflict was, it never ended with the initial topic of conflict, it always ended with like, and you won't talk to me when blah, 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 and you don't know how to deal with conflict and talk things out. And that's sort of how it went. So that's where the complaint came into play, is like, it would start with some little thing, right? And then he'd kind of start to shut down, and then it would escalate back into, well, you're wrong because you can't talk things out with me, and I need to talk things out and process. So here's the deal. Once she learned about fronts, she could start to see some of these payoffs. She could start to see how she was making him so wrong for not, being able to talk it out and kind of deal with conflict in the way that she wanted it to be dealt with. She was also looking good, like, oh, I'm well versed in my emotions and communication and, conflict management skills, and you're not. So that made her look good. And she also was dominating him, which is one of the other payoffs. So she's being right, looking good, and dominating him. And he's just backed into, feeling like he's backed into a little corner, and he already doesn't like to deal with confrontation. And she's basically like in her serious masculine energy kind of going off on him. And of course he's not going to speak up. So that was impactful for her to start to see some of these payoffs. And then some of the costs, I mean, you just don't think about this when you're kind of arguing. You might feel it, or afterward you might feel guilty. You're like, oh, why did I say that, or whatever it is. But we don't stop to like really kind of pull things apart and look at these payoffs and costs. So that's why this is so impactful for people. So yeah, this woman basically also started to see like, oh my gosh, like this is where, I can see that every time that happens, it's completely compromising our connection, our love, our happiness, our joy, our peace of mind. And yeah, it's just like each time that she'd go off like that and would make him wrong and dominate him, their relationship was kind of like just slowly disintegrating with that. So yeah, and then really like what kind of hit home with her, and this was a little bit tough for her to sort of see at the beginning, was the avoidance of responsibility. And this is a huge one to kind of look at. So, in these, behind, rooted in the payoffs, there is an avoidance of responsibility. And so this really kind of took her some time to sit and look, because still kind of in her head, her evil twin would still kind of pipe up every now and again and be like, well, but he should, like take a conflict management class and like have the balls to like talk to me, or, whatever it was. So what it really took was for her to separate herself from her evil twin. I mean, you could also say that it's your ego talking, but she kind of had to step out of that and step back into what she was actually committed to in the relationship, which is love and peace and ease and joy and connection, and kind of, I guess, reclaim her spot inside her own head and really start to kind of look at where this avoidance of responsibility was lying and hiding behind this front. So essentially what she got was that she was responsible for him shutting down. And she wasn't necessarily she was responsible in the moment, but like this couple did some serious work, and he uncovered that, she's lucky he was willing to also do the work with her and kind of look and discover. But basically in growing up, he learned to shut down in any sort of conflict because his, if he spoke up around his mom, he'd get whacked. And so that kind of started his habit of shutting down in the face of confrontation or conflict. Now, she wasn't, responsible for that happening in his childhood, but what she was responsible for was the way that she was being in these heated situations. So essentially, she was kind of reminding her partner of his mother. And this is all kind of subconscious stuff that goes on. He wasn't just in his conscious brain like, oh, I might get whacked if I speak up. It just, it's all kind of hidden deep down in there. But yeah, I mean, there was an avoidance of responsibility for looking at what is behind all this, and also avoiding responsibility for actually dealing with this consistent complaint. You know, it was something that constantly came up in their relationship, whether it was like he, you know, whatever it was that would trigger her, and, you know, she'd get going on something. And you know, she never stopped to look to actually deal with the root of the problem. And she never really stopped to realize, like, every time this happens, I mean, she created habit for herself too, of like, okay, here we go, conflict management, and in I go to dominating, making wrong, and looking good. And that's the other part of these fronts, is that's the payoff, is, you know, that evil twin wants to be right. It wants to look good. It wants to dominate. It wants to win, you know, and our brains, our survival brains, are designed to want to be right. And so yeah, this consistent complaint paired with just her being frustrated and kind of angry, and, you know, her voice would get loud, and there might be some screaming or yelling going on, and that would trigger him to go into his turtle shell mode. And so she, you know, once she like really, really got present to the avoidance of responsibility, as well as the payoffs and the costs going on behind this front, she was able to, you know, step out of that evil twin mode and really start to kind of look and open up a conversation first with herself, and how, you know, what was she willing to do, and what was she really committed to in this relationship, and how did she want to approach this the next time, you know, any sort of conflict came up. And then also taking it the next step into, you know, how does she want to have a conversation about this, and what she's discovered about herself with her partner. And really, I mean, it only takes one side to do some of this work. Like, she could have shifted things in a relationship and created connection without her partner even stopping to look and do work himself to realize what had gone on in his childhood, to realize how that was trickling into his current relationship. That's completely unnecessary to, you know, start recognizing these fronts, recognizing the avoidance of responsibility, and how you can, you know, shed light on these things, that what's going on behind the scenes, to then move back into connection in your relationship. So it's kind of a cool thing. And you guys, I welcome you to start looking at what are your consistent complaints? Like, what are your fronts? Like, what's behind those consistent complaints, specifically in your relationship? And just start to kind of peel back the onion layer. And, you know, you don't need your partner to do this work with you. It's very helpful, and I highly recommend it, but you really don't. Like, you do have all the power. You do have 100% responsibility to make your relationship be whatever you want it to be. And it all comes back to getting clear on what you're committed to, and getting clear on what you're committed to feeling in your relationship. And I mean, for a lot of us, it's, you know, we want like love and connection and intimacy and partnership and just peace and ease. How lovely would that be if it could be consistently like that? And it can. I mean, that's the magical part, is that you do have control and you do have a say in how your relationship goes. And it just starts with awareness. And so that is what I got for you today. Start to kind of look and just see where you're fronting, playa. I know you are. Yeah, we all got some of those going on. So yeah. And just to recap, a front is a consistent complaint that is coming from your evil twin, usually being angry, frustrated, nasty, anything other than what you want to show up as: thoughtful, loving, compassionate, caring, whatever it may be. So that is how you can tell you are frontin'. So thanks so much for listening, and I hope this helps. Feel free to pass this on and share this with anyone else who might be fronting. And that's all for today, guys. Have an awesome evening, and I will talk to you all soon.